All right. Well, welcome today to the Desert Water Agency Rate Increase Workshop. We're talking about rates that are proposed. This is nothing that has been set in stone yet, but it is something that Desert Water Agency's Board of Directors will be deciding in the near future. So we wanted an opportunity to present to members of the public and share some information. Likely, you received a publication in the mail that outlined how the rates are changing, why they're changing, and some of the things that Desert Water Agency has done to avoid increasing the rates beyond the levels you see in the document. So I want to do a quick round of introductions for those of you that are watching this video on Zoom or perhaps on our website at a later date. My name's Ashley Metzger. I work with the Outreach and Conservation team and the Water Planning team at Desert Water Agency. And there are some other staff members here that I want to introduce. Our general manager is here, and we've got our board president, Paul Ortega, here. And we also have presenting today, our assistant general manager, Steve Johnson, and our finance director, Esther Sines. And then we've got our outreach and conservation manager, Melinda Weinrich, helping facilitate the meeting along with Jamie Hoffman, of course. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move into a little bit about who Desert Water Agency is. Needless to say, you've probably seen a Desert Water Agency envelope in the mail, probably containing one of our bills. But who we are, we're a public water agency. We are not a private entity like SCE or SoCalGas. We are a local government. We provide tap water in the Palm Springs area and parts of Cathedral City, and also wastewater services in parts of Cathedral City. We recycle water and deliver it to sites in Palm Springs for irrigation, and we also manage water in the Western Coachella Valley, including the Desert Hot Springs area. Some of the costs that we have in order to keep all of these services running smoothly include system maintenance and repairs, and that includes pipelines, reservoirs, booster systems, and beyond. There's new infrastructure and equipment that we have to plan for, not even necessarily to expand the system, but even within the existing system to keep up with technology and changes over time and to replace aging equipment. We've got water treatment, sampling, testing, and reporting costs, long-term planning and sustainability so that my grandchildren and their grandchildren in the Coachella Valley can enjoy water like we do today. Water conservation programs, most of which are grant funded. And then we do have staff costs. We have experts that help keep our team running and keep the system up and operating and safe and smooth and reliable. And then, of course, there's other miscellaneous costs that we incur for a variety of things, and we'll get into some detail later in the presentation. So most of the costs fall into two categories. You have fixed costs, which do not change based on the amount of water a customer uses. And you have variable costs. These costs do change if you use 10 units of water or 100 units of water. Your impact to DWA will be different for energy, water supply cost, water treatment cost. But the bulk of the costs, meter reading, billing, capital improvement, keeping the system maintained, all of the water quality work we have to do to make sure the water is safe, our staffing costs, our building costs, those are going to be the same whether you use 10 units of water or 100. So Desert Water Agency pays for its costs through monthly water bills, wastewater bills, recycled water bills, also through property tax. And there's a small portion of property tax that we have the flexibility to use for almost anything. But most of the property tax collected can only be used for one specific set of costs, and that's around the imported water supply. So we also have grants that help cover some of our costs, and we'll talk about the details of that a little bit later, but we do try to pretty aggressively go after grant funding. And then we have investment returns that we're able to use and hopefully offset some of the increases to rates in the future. So what these fixed and variable costs look like on your water bill are outlined here. The orange arrow points to a consumption charge that you would see on your bill. So you'll see in parentheses 28 times 2.28. So the current billing rate is $2.28. And this sample bill, someone has used 28 units. And that is going to reflect their variable charge on their bill. And then their fixed charge is below with a yellow arrow. So that amount is going to be the same on their bill every month until and unless there's some sort of a rate increase. Now, your tax bill, you may not be as familiar with what that looks like. Many people pay their tax bill through their mortgage. So you may not have looked at the line item on the bill that has a 10-cent charge for every $100 in assessed value of a property. And that may decrease this year. That's something else that the Desert Water Agency Board of Directors is going to look at. Property values have gone up a lot in recent years, and that's mixed news. Some people are very happy about that, and other people, housing has become a challenge. But for Desert Water Agency, it has meant a lot more revenue. And because of the fact that these property taxes have brought in more revenue, we have more than we need to cover that one set of costs. So we are looking at possibly lowering that tax rate in very short order than increasing the water rate. So it's a little bit confusing because, one thing is going to be going down and the other thing may be going up. So it's just because those property taxes have a very specific narrow use, and we can't use them for other things. So what has changed with the water rate that requires it to go up? Well, inflation. The cost of just about everything has gone up, whether you're going to the grocery store or the gas station or, paying your monthly bills. We're doing those things here too. We have to pay for fuel, and we have to pay for supplies, and we have an electric bill. So we're facing all of the same issues that homes are. And we're also, on top of that, undergoing some pretty major projects. Pipeline replacement is a significant project that our Assistant General Manager, Steve Johnson, is going to talk about in a little bit. There are a lot of new state and federal regulations that we are also responding to that have increased our costs. So more water quality sampling requirements, more reporting requirements. We'll get into details on these later. And then our Finance Director, Esther Sines, is going to talk about our new reserve funding targets and why it's so important that we are able to have enough reserves to stay financially healthy and reduce our risk. So the bottom line is a firm called NBS conducted an independent study using American Water Works Association standard methods, and they did determine that DWA water rate is not charging enough currently to cover its cost. And by law, DWA can only charge the cost of service. So again, we're a public agency, we're charging the cost of service, and we're not prohibited, or we're not permitted to charge more than that. But to remain financially sound, we do have to consider increasing these rates. So the first question that comes to mind is, okay, well, rates have to go up by how much? So it depends on which rate we're talking about. For most of the people watching this presentation, you're probably within the Palm Springs area and looking at water service, and DWA needs to collect 6.2% more revenue from water service than it currently does. So that means those fixed and variable costs that we talked about before are both going to go up. And the other rates are planned to go up as well, but they probably won't impact you as directly. Perhaps you're in the Cathedral City area and you also pay for wastewater services. You may see a small difference in your bill for that as well. So before we get into the numbers for these rates, we wanted to familiarize you with water units. So the most common water units, a gallon. People are pretty familiar with what a gallon of water looks like, how much size-wise you're thinking about. Now, when we bill you for water, that bill will have a number of gallons in it if you look hard enough, but the units that you see on the line item for your consumption charge are going to be in 100 cubic feet. It's going to say HCF on your bill. So 100 cubic feet is equal to 748 gallons. So you're talking about an extraordinary amount of water for, at present, $2.28. Now, an acre foot is another unit of water, but it's a very, very, very large amount of water. And that is how we charge our groundwater pumpers the replenishment assessment charge. So they're paying an acre feet because we're dealing in a much, much, much larger quantity here. And 1 acre foot is 325, nearly 326,000 gallons. So the proposed water rates per unit, these are our variable charges based on how many units you use each month, which will be different in January than it is in July, certainly. Currently, we're at $2.28, and by the end of the proposed rate increase period, we would be at $3.10. It's really important to note that each one of these numbers is the maximum level that the board can implement up to. So when you see this in the mail, you'll notice these amounts, and those are the ceiling. Unless DWA sends out another similar notice, those are the ceiling to which the board can raise a rate in a given year. And the board may elect not to raise a rate in a given year, which there's a very recent example of that happening during the COVID-19 pandemic. There was a rate increase that was scheduled to go into effect, and the board said, we don't want to do that right now. People are struggling with a lot. And that rate increase was not implemented until January of 2022. So in addition, we have the fixed charge that we saw on the bill, and that's currently at $33.53. And at the end of the 5-year period would be up to $48.84. This is the monthly charge that would be on the bill, even if your property did not use any water in a given month, or if your property used, 400 units of water, that charge remains the same. And it's going to be the same month to month for the entire calendar year is what's proposed. So you see, we are looking at, for both the volumetric charge and the meter charge, January 1 implementation dates. So whole picture here, if someone's using 31 units of water, their bill's going to go from $104 now to about $114 in January. The bill for January probably won't be that much, because in January, you're probably not using 31 units of water. You're probably using quite a bit less than that. But on annual average. Additionally, if you're using 20 units of water, which it might be more in the realm of what people see themselves using, that's about $8 increase per month. So we want to also talk with you about the other charges. The replenishment assessment charge may not seem relevant. It's for groundwater pumpers. You probably don't have a well and pump groundwater at home. But this charge is something that DWA also pays when it pumps water to serve to your home and to the businesses in the community. So it's part of that water rate. And it allows DWA to keep the basin sustainable by offsetting the pumping with imported water supplies. The wastewater charge, Desert Water Agency uses this charge to cover the collection and delivery of wastewater to treatment entities. So DWA does not treat wastewater, and nor do we charge for wastewater services in the city of Palm Springs. This charge applies to customers in Cathedral City. So if you're in the Dream Homes neighborhood, you pay this charge to DWA. We collect your sewage, we convey your sewage, we pump it on over to the city of Palm Springs, and then they treat the water. And on your bill, you see a charge that's from City of Palm Springs, and there's also a DWA component of that charge. And then the same is true if you're in the Cathedral City Cove or the business corridor. We collect your water and we move it over to Coachella Valley Water District. And on your bill, there's a component from Desert Water Agency and a component that's a pass-through for Coachella Valley Water District. We're just talking today about the component that is for Desert Water Agency's services. So if you're in the city of Palm Springs, you probably pay for your wastewater on your property tax bill, and this does not apply to you. That said, for those of you in Cathedral City that are served by Desert Water Agency, the charge is currently $6.15, and starting January 1, 2028 is proposed at $8.81. And I'm going to invite up our Assistant General Manager, Steve Johnson, to talk to you a little bit about what zone pumping charges are and where they apply and to whom.
Righty. Thank you, Ashley. So yeah, we lift your water from the ground using our wells. And for most of our customers, the majority of them, the wells have enough power to lift the water to our reservoirs just one time. If you look at this map on the screen, zone C, A, and F would be those zones where the wells have enough power to lift to our reservoirs. However, the homes that live or properties that are at higher elevations require more pumping to get the water up to our higher elevated reservoirs. For example, if you live at the top of the cove, that water is required to be not only lifted by our wells, but we have another booster that has to lift that water to a higher reservoir at the top of the cove. Because of that, we have to charge an extra power rate associated with that cost. And that is added to your cost of your normal water bill. And for zone H, that would be an additional 31 cents. And with that, I'd hand it back over to Ashley. There are other zones that have that type of rate. The Acanto zone, which would be zone B, that would be an additional 29 cents starting in January of 2024.
Thank you, Steve. I think it's important to note that the majority of customers that Desert Water Agency has do not pay this zone pumping charge. It really only applies to those higher elevation properties. So we do have a map available there. If you go to dwa.org/rates, you can easily find that map and determine if this charge applies to you. So now that we talked about how much the rates are going up, let's talk a little bit about why. We have already talked about inflation, replacing our aging pipelines, regulations, and these reserve targets to help us with urgent and long-term costs. So let's dig into the details, dive a little deeper. Inflation has gone up pretty staggeringly. I don't think this is a shock to anyone here. It's something we're all grappling with, and we have just seen costs for just about everything that we have to pay for go up. And as a government agency that charges the cost of service, that's going to impact our rates. And I'm going to pull Steve back up here to talk to you about pipeline replacement, which is a really important project that we've been working on for a long time here at Desert Water Agency.
Again, thank you, Ash. Thank you, Ashley. As Ashley said, we have been working on pipeline replacements for several years. So why do we have a pipeline replacement project? Well, our system is comprised of over 400 miles of pipe, and 55 miles of that pipe is unlined steel water main. This unlined steel water main has a high rate of leaks. 22 miles of that water main has exceeded its life expectancy of 70 years. Now, That has caused numerous leaks throughout our system. That main was installed in the all of the unlined steel pipe was installed in the 30s, 40s, and 50s by the previous water districts or private companies that owned the water system, Palm Springs Water and Cathedral City Water Districts. And we inherited that when we took them over and acquired them in 1968. So 22 of the unlined mains, as I said, have reached their life expectancy, causing numerous leaks, which also then causes us to have to make those repairs. Over the past 12 months, we have had over 700 leaks in our system and had over 6,000 labor hours towards making those repairs. Now, the city of Palm Springs has a very aggressive not pipeline replacement, but paving street rehabilitation program. We don't want to have to go in there and replace our mains a year after they replace the paving. So we work very hard with the city staff to ensure that we coordinate that work. Therefore, the cities does not waste their time and money on paving that we may rip out. Now, we lift the water out of the ground. By doing that, that takes energy. We then treat the water with a little chlorine. Now, if that water is leaked out of the pipes and does not get to our reservoirs or the customers, that's a wasted cost to us. So we're trying to avoid that. The material that we put in the ground is ductile iron pipe. That life expectancy for that new main is over 100+ years. Those are the reasons why we have a pipeline replacement project. Now, currently, we are looking at a very aggressive program. We are trying to replace 6 miles of mains over a year, and with a budget of $8 to $8.5 million. It is aggressive. The board 3 or 4 years ago, or maybe longer, I think maybe 4 years ago, decided that we need to increase our pipeline replacement project and increase that budget from around $3 million to that $8 million. And with that, I will hand it over to Ashley.
Thank you, Steve. Pipeline replacement is a really important part of what we do here in Desert Water Agency. You can think of it a little bit like painting the Golden Gate Bridge, right? When we get finished kind of replacing the pipe that it's at the end of its life cycle, then we have to start over again and start replacing the new oldest stock pipe in our system so that we maintain that reliability and that safety that we need. So the other driver we spoke about earlier were state and federal regulations. There's a lot of reporting requirements. We're submitting reports to the state on a monthly basis, numerous reports on an annual basis, on a 5-year basis. And the reporting has skyrocketed. Even in the time that I've been involved with Desert Water Agency, I mean, we're looking at, 3 or 4 times as many reports that we have to submit. And they're very complex and they take a lot of time and effort, sometimes consultants, lots of staff time to review. On top of that, we're dealing with more stringent water quality standards. So every time the government, the state or the federal government makes water quality standards more strict, that means that we have to do more testing, more monitoring, more reporting. And that includes staff and equipment and sometimes building a new filtration plant like we did for Snow Creek. We also have a new clean fleet requirement that is going to require us to phase out all of those really old diesel power vehicles that we use to haul things and buy more costly new electric vehicles, some of which don't exist yet. So we are planning for the future in that way, and certainly dealing with a very long list of state and federal regulations that seems to be growing every year. And we're going to move into talking a bit about our funding reserve targets, and I'd like to invite our finance director, Esther Sines, to come up and talk about that.
Thank you, Ashley. Well, first of all, what are reserves? And you can think about that as your savings account. We're saving money for unexpected events or things that we're planning for in the future. One reaction that I hear is you have a lot of money. You have millions of dollars in reserves. Number one, why do you need that much? Why do you need to fund more? Well, while we do have pretty healthy reserve levels right now, they do not quite meet our recommended targets according to the study that was done by NBS. And to bring it into perspective, that though the reserve levels are large, we also have quite a substantial monthly operating budget. So that is in the realm of about $40 million for just our normal operating expenses. So that's to kind of bring into perspective how much it takes to fund the agency's operations, just our ongoing operations. That's not including what it costs to replace pipeline that Steve was just talking about. Our reserves, they also allow us to smooth your rates. So cash flows, they are inconsistent. We do not collect water bill revenue at the same rate that we spend. That's on a monthly basis or on an annual basis. Some years we may have more cash flow than what we are actually spending, what's going out the door. And it would be really nice to be able to say, we'll reduce your rate in that year. But then the following year, when we have more cash outlays in that year, we would have to raise your rate even more. So it's best to be better to keep it consistent, just small incremental increases so that we can have the necessary revenues that we need. And those reserves help us to do that year over year. Also, those reserves allow us to meet unexpected things that happen if emergencies happen, such as a disaster happens. So if there's a major earthquake and there is interruption in your water service, we need to be able to respond as quickly as possible to restore water service to your property so that you have that for just regular health and safety reasons. So if we did not have adequate reserves, we would not be able to respond quickly, and we would have to go out and find the funding before FEMA would be able to kick in and provide those emergency funding sources. Currently, we maintain the goal is to maintain at least 6 months of operating reserves. Plus we have other reserves or savings accounts for other purposes, for land acquisitions, disaster response, as I just indicated, and other labor related costs. And one thing that I would like to note is that we have our reserves. Some funds are restricted and we cannot use them for any other purpose. So we've set it in a reserve to make sure that we are not commingling funds. We're not taking in revenues from your water and spending it on your wastewater service or vice versa. So those reserves are restricted and they can only be used for certain things. Same as the tax revenues that Ashley had talked about earlier. We cannot use them for anything other than paying for that source of supply through the State Water Project. So we have reserves specifically for that. And those costs, they vary greatly from year to year. So it's important for us to have adequate reserves to be able to meet those needs in any given year.
Thank you, Esther. And I think it's important to point out that reserves aren't just something we keep adding to and adding to. They are something that even in a given budget year as the one coming up, we do plan to use reserves strategically to achieve what we need to without raising rates beyond what is listed in the document that you received in the mail. So after all of this, you may be saying, okay, well, we know how much rates are going up. We understand why, but what have you done as an agency to reduce your costs? So Desert Water Agency has applied for numerous federal and state grants. And in the past several years, we've been awarded 17, totaling $10.2 million. Most of those are going to conservation programs, but they're also going to important initiatives like expanding the recycled water system and rolling out new smart meters that will reduce our expenses for meter reading. We've also renegotiated our contracts with Southern California Edison to bring in more money for every unit of hydropower we generate at the 2 hydropower facilities that we have. We've entered into new contracts to generate revenue from vacant land, and there are some positions that we have not filled. So we are looking also not only to increase what's coming in, but to decrease the amount of money going out and bring in more grant money. So we understand that affordability may be a very real challenge because we're facing inflation and so are the homes and businesses in the community. And there are people for whom paying a water bill is going to be a real decision at the end of the day as to, are they paying rent? Are they paying their water bill? Are they paying their power bill? Do they have to buy less groceries? And during our last rate increase process in 2016, we established this Help to Others customer assistance program. It's managed by the United Way, and people apply to this program and they're eligible for up to $200 in bill credits each year. So if they meet the criteria, they get the $200 credit and they can apply again the next year. If you have concerns about being able to afford bills now or under a proposed rate increase, please contact United Way of the Desert. Please go to our website and it will connect you with that resource. Additionally, there is a county program. It's called the Low Income Household Water Assistance Program. If you go to DWA.org, there is information on both the county program and on the Desert Water Agency program. So a question that we also get a lot is, are rates going up because of water conservation? That's a really complicated question that cannot be answered with a yes or a no. It's a little bit of both. So in the long run, conservation helps us reduce the need for major investments. So in the long run, conservation is going to save money and mean lower rates. But in the short run, as we collect money from water bills every month, if we see usage drop, that is going to impact our financial health on a monthly or even an annual basis. So we do have some tools in the tool belt that Esther's going to come up and explain. But at the end of the day, I do want to remind everyone who's watching this, if you use less water, your bill will be less. So think about that regardless of if the proposed rates are approved or not. Think about how you can use less water so that, you know, the impact of the rate increase will be minimized for your home. All right. Thank you, Esther.
Thank you. So not only do we have our regular variable rate and our fixed charge, we have these other tools in the tool belt, as Ashley was saying, to help us generate the appropriate revenue or cash flow that we need in order to meet our expenses. The first one, which is one that we already have in place, and so this would just be adjusting those rates to adjust them up according to the new rate study, is our drought rate. Now, the drought rate, it is tied to our water shortage contingency plan. So when each level of that contingency plan is enacted by the board, we are allowed to then implement a drought rate. However, That does not mean, just because that we're required to conserve, whether it be by a local water supply emergency or a state mandate, that does not mean that we will enact the drought rate. It is a board decision and that they will look at and put in place if it's needed. So while Ashley explained earlier about our fixed and variable charges, even with not using the water, we still have a sizable amount of fixed charges that we must pay for regardless of whether you are using the water or not. So this drought rate is added on top of the variable charge to help to bring in more funds so that we can continue to meet our ongoing expenses. So for example, we just got out of a stage 2, level 2 level out of the water shortage contingency plan, and that's that 10 to 20% level. If we were to have enacted the drought rate, it would have been an additional 37 cents on top of your $2.28 per unit of water, totaling $2.65. So in the future, that amount would just be adjusted up a little bit according to each stage within the plan to generate that extra revenue. Now, we also have a revenue stabilization rate. This is a new rate for the agency because as we learned in recent years because of COVID, there are other things that can happen besides a drought that can cause our revenues to decrease. And as I mentioned before, we need to continue to pay our bills. So this is just another tool in the tool belt for the board to be able to use, to be able to enact, if necessary, to be able to raise our revenues so that we can continue to pay our bills. And it will be removed once revenues have returned to the previously anticipated level. So essentially what we budgeted for and planned for and matched our cash outflows to. So with that, I'll pass it back to Ashley.
Thank you, Esther. I also think it's really important to note that this drought rate is something we've had in place since 2016. And even though we had a major drought and we did enact that level 2 of our water shortage contingency plan, the board did not elect to put that rate in at that time. And that's because the financial circumstances didn't necessarily call for it at that time. So it's a really complex network of decision making, and our board of directors, which are made up of elected members of the community, evaluate that and may decide to put it in or may perhaps decide to use a little bit more from reserves. So just understanding that it's a kind of tool of last resort available in the toolkit. So we're wrapping up now. Thank you for your patience and getting through some pretty dense material here. Just want to recap on the process. So a third-party entity you've heard referred to a couple times today, NBS, prepared a rate study using some industry best practices. And they put together this rate study and it was brought to the board of directors, and the board of directors adopted that in April. And then the following month, just a few weeks ago, Desert Water Agency mailed out a notice to its customers. So all DWA customers should have received this notice in the mail. And we are doing public workshops like this. And you can view this video on demand. We're sending this information out on a variety of channels: the City of Palm Springs newsletter, the Palm Springs Post, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're really trying to get the word out there so that people have an opportunity to ask questions, get engaged, learn more. And ultimately, if people want to protest, they have the opportunity to do that. So one venue that's going to be really important for that is the public hearing. This is when the board of directors will decide whether or not to put this 5-year rate plan into effect. And it's important to note that even if they adopt the 5-year rate plan, they may not necessarily every year increase rates to the maximum level. They may decide to increase rates to a lower level or skip a year of rate increases, as we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the rates are slated to go into effect in January of 2024. So this gives you ample time to kind of prepare, plan, budget, look at what your rates may be in the future. It is important to note that the recycled water and the groundwater replenishment assessment charge would go into effect July 1. So that will be a bit sooner. If the rates are not adopted, Desert Water Agency's budget for the next fiscal year will have to be cut, and we'd have to use or lean into our reserves a bit more than we had planned to. So what can you do? Well, ask us questions. You know, we're hopeful that we'll get some questions emailed in. If you reach out to us, call us, certainly ask questions here today. We're happy to answer them. This team will stick around. You can also request a rate analysis for your property after the meeting, or if you're viewing this later, you can email us and we can plug your usage numbers in and give you some estimated bills for 2024. Review the rate study. So that rate study prepared by NBS is available on our website. It's a nice thick document that you can work your way through and really understand the methodology. You can submit a written protest. So all of the protests for this process, you know, you're certainly welcome to voice your concern at the hearing, but we will actually tally all of the written protests. And if more than 50% of the customers protest the rate, the board of directors will not be able to enact the rate. But the ability to submit a protest, you can mail it in, or you can go to dwa.org/protest and fill out the form. It'll let you know what the key pieces of information are. And certainly come to the hearing on June 28th and share your perspective with our board of directors. And I'd always like to remind people, as someone who comes from the world of water conservation, reduce your water use at home or at your business. You know, work with Desert Water Agency. We have a lot of grant funded programs that can help you do this. Incentives that make it a really smart choice to install a new toilet or to get a new water efficient washing machine in and save water for years to come, which will mean lower water bills in the future. And you can learn more about that at dwa.org/save. And certainly for those with affordability concerns, another reminder on that Help to Others in the Riverside County program, both of which are accessible by dwa.org/H2O. And with that, we will ask if there is anyone on the Zoom or anyone in the room that has any questions for us today. Melinda, can you check the Zoom and see if we've got anything in the chat? Okay, so no questions in the chat. And it doesn't look like we have any questions in the room right now, but please do feel free to email us, give us a call. The phone number here is 760-323-4971. And if you dial extension 184, you'll be connected with Melinda. And if she doesn't have the answer to your question, she certainly can connect you with someone that does. We want to thank you for taking the time to watch this and learning more about your water. And remember, you know, stay tuned, participate. Our board meetings are held the first and third Tuesday of every month at 8 a.m. And you can participate virtually or in person at 1200 South Genotry Trail. Thank you.